Hi there, and thanks for tuning into this video on my channel that is focused on endless mode play. I don't plan on making a habit of doing Let's Play style talking during my videos, but I may occasionally talk under certain circumstances, and this is an example as I'm introducing a new endless mode variant on Invisible, Inc. that I'm calling Invisible, Inc. Max. This intro presumes that you know a lot about Invisible, Inc., so if this is over your head or you don't care, then you can skip this. But honestly, right now, that seems unlikely because since my entire channel is Invisible, Inc. at the moment, then you should have some idea of what this game is. Otherwise, what are you doing here, right? So, I'm going to talk in pretty specific terms about this game. If you get lost, then feel free to ask me questions or just skip this video altogether and be entertained by the endless mode without this introduction. Just so that this may not be a complete waste of your time, here's a picture of Trogdor. Up to this point, all of my endless videos have been on a single run of Invisible, Inc. that has difficulty settings that are ramped up pretty high but not cranked up to the maximum possible settings. For this variant, all of the difficulties are cranked up with the exception of time attack, which I'm keeping at a reasonable 2 minutes. So let me just go through this real here and do those settings. We're going to do 0 rewinds, so Iron Man, no level retries, and all this stuff I'm going to put up to the maximum. Extended to campaign, all this stuff is fine. Auto increment the alarm, we're going to put this to endless. We're going to say that the campaign hours is going to be, mission start power is going to be 0. The alarm stages are normal. The credit multiplier is going to be 0.5. Guards per level is going to be more. No on the safeguard patrols. The additional KO time is going to be -1. Alarm would guards get KO'd. Don't show me the danger zones. Don't allow melee while seen. We're going to do increased flammable resistance. We're going to do alarm multiplier at 5 at the maximum. Starting money at 0. Consoles, none. And safes per level, none. We're going to do 20 rooms per level. And we're going to do more damage quality. And put time attack mode at 2 minutes. These are the settings that I set up for this Invisible, Inc. Max, but I'm not actually going to be broadcasting these from the beginning of this particular run. In between the streams that I did for the Ramped Endless run, I started experimenting with these max settings. I kept on getting destroyed in the first and second levels until eventually, after about 10 failures, I found the magic ingredients that had gotten me pretty stable. So my broadcasts are going to start about 15 days into this endless mode. And since I'm starting at that point, I wanted to touch on how I got to this point. First off, every game that I've played up to this point, I've started with the same configuration. Derek, because of his teleport ability, and Dr. Zoo, because his primary usefulness was being able to get into safes without using power and bypassing any daemons that were on safes. So the setting of no safes made Dr. Zoo not a great choice, and the setting of no consoles meant that Derek's teleport, which needs 4 power to activate, might have been more difficult to pull off. As far as programs, I always started with Seed, which meant that my first program cost 4 less per turn, and then also Parasite, because I like the fact that the first Parasite that you place is free, and that ultimately you can get more firewalls down with less power consumption. It just takes a longer period of time than if you did it immediately. So because of the increased settings of no consoles, no safes, and then also the alarm multiplier 5, I felt like I needed to try to find different agents and different programs to be able to successfully survive levels. I looked at all of the agents at my disposal, and I eventually landed on 2 that I thought were a winning combination. The first is Archive Prism. Archive Prism doesn't start with any weapons, but does start with this hollow projection mesh, which disguises her as a guard, allowing her to pass through guards seen or cameras seen, almost acting like a cloak, except without any kind of cooldown. Now it does take 2 power per turn in order to use, and I can't run directly in front of a guard or they'll see right through that hollow projection. So in conjunction with this, because I needed to try to make sure I maintained power, I ended up finding a program, not Seed, for generating power as opposed to saving cost of power, and that ended up being Dynamo, which generates 2 power points per turn, but it doesn't start until level 2. But since I have an alarm multiplier of 5, that meant that every turn would increase the overall alarm level. So in normal play, alarm level 2 doesn't happen until 10 turns later, but in max, this happens 2 turns later. So it'll only take 2 turns before the 2 power cost for the disguise would get covered by Dynamo. So I felt like that was a winning combination for that first agent. For the second agent, I decided I wanted to have an agent that could support the fact that Prism had no weapon. So as I poked around, I ended up finding Shalem, which starts with 2 weapons. One is a disruptor, and once is a ranged weapon with lethal weapon with armor piercing 1. I decided that instead of using the regular Shalem that has an armor piercing 1 weapon, I wanted to use instead the Archive, which had a lethal weapon with no armor piercing, but also had a ventricular lance, so you could apply +1 armor piercing to the turn, just so I had more flexibility to add +1 to the armor piercing if I had another weapon. And as far as the actual hacking was concerned, I decided that I want to stick with Parasite. So I tried this, and I discovered just how difficult it was. I slowly got better at adjusting my play to match, and just kept on hoping that I would get lucky enough to find Wisp on my first or second mission. I didn't care about lethal weapons, because raising the alarm level once per turn meant that it would get to the maximum 6 really quickly. So killing guards didn't really have a negative, except that you lose some credits at the end of the stage if you kill guards. I actually did have one run in the middle of my failures where I did get Wisp, and I got up to about stage 3 or stage 4, and then I just blew it and made a stupid mistake and just messed up and died. So I had to start over again. And then, about 8 tries later, in the first level, the Nanofabricator in the Executive Terminal level had Reactive Moimer. Reactive Moimer reduces the agent's AP by 2 to start, but every alarm level, it raises that agent's AP by 1. The trick is, while the alarm level on the screen maxes at 6, the counter of alarm levels continues to count even beyond the alarm levels behind the scenes. Since the alarm level raised every turn in the max settings, that meant that the AP for all my agents went up by 1 every single turn. So 30 turns later, my AP could have been up to 30 to 35. This was too important to pass up, so in the run that I found it, I actually ended up selling Shalem's ventricular lance, and I think one of his weapons as well, in order to afford getting Reactive Moimer right away. So as I went through the various missions, my goals to reach a stable endless mode with these max settings started to take shape. Give every agent on my team Reactive Moimer, and give everyone except Prism a cloak. I also wanted to try to get at least 2 distributed processing augments installed so I could have constant power growth beyond what Dynamo would do with Prism to stabilize the +2 of Dynamo and the -2 that was needed for Prism's Hollow Disguise to work. That got me to where I am now, where I indeed have everyone equipped with Reactive Moimer and with cloaks. I've made Prism my hacking specialist with a lot of buster chips. Shalem ended up being my melee specialist with stacking penetration scanners. I picked up Decker as my 3rd agent, and he became my distance weapon specialist with stacking piercing scanners. And then I ended up finding Derek as my 4th rescue agent, which was great because his teleport definitely became useful as I started to build programs that could generate more power and stabilize my power. And he right now is a hodgepodge character with no real focus, but the teleport makes that useful. He has an augment that gives him a little bit more AP when he uses an item. He's just kind of a useful utility character that I move around as needed. One other important note as an introduction is that something that I discovered with the ramped up alarm multiplier is that Chief Executive Suite levels are much more difficult to pull off because the Executive spooks after only 5 turns. It wasn't until I had secured a whole lot of augments and a whole lot of things in my agents that I felt comfortable to try the level at all, which involved Reactive Moimer, those cloaks, a bunch of Stim 3s, that makes me blow through as many rooms as I can within those first 5 turns to find the Executive before he bolts for a teleport. It's difficult, but right now it's the most exciting and dangerous part of this particular variant because all the other ones are now pretty stable. And vault cards are always useful when money is really scarce with no safes and half multiplier for anything that I pickpocket. So I still plan on targeting those as best I can and hope that I can get my success rate even higher, even with the randomly generated levels. I wish I had recorded the initial missions where I was able to develop all of these things to this point, but hindsight and all of that jazz. Given that I'm now on day 15 of this and I'm still going strong with no real danger of losing unless I make a stupid mistake or happen to be on a level with a high degree of 360 sight guards and I'm running out of my cooldown of cloaks that I have to use to avoid them, I thought it was time to spotlight this variant on this channel and create some more varied content. At some point I am going to try to do some other content of other video games with Endless Mode that's not just Invisible Ink, but for right now, because of where I am in my work life and in my personal life, I don't have the time to try to go and seek out other Endless Modes that can be multi-episode. If I wanted to, I could try to unlock Endless Mode for Papers, Please and play a bunch of that, but I'm enjoying doing this Invisible Ink stuff, and hopefully you viewers are enjoying it as well. If you do, then please consider subscribing to my channel and liking my videos. If you have any other ideas for other content for this channel, aside from Papers, Please, if you know about endless modes that are also multi-episode possible, like Invisible Ink is for me, then please feel free to throw it my way. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.